When declaring constructors, sometimes we have to declare them using the explicit keyword. Let me show you an example. So back to our project, let's add a new class here called person. Now I want to give this class an attribute called age. So in the private section, we declare a member variable called age. Now it would be nice to add a constructor here so we can initialize a person object with an age. So in the public section, we add a constructor that takes an integer, okay? Now, if we try to generate the definition for this constructor, we see CLion giving us a suggestion saying single argument constructors must be marked explicit to avoid unintentional implicit conversions. What is this? Well, before we talk about this, first, let's generate the definition for this constructor. Now here we can use a member initializer list to initialize the age attribute. Now let's go back to our main file. We're going to include the person header file. Now let's define a function called showPerson that takes a person object. Now we don't want to worry about anything in this function. I just want to create a person object and pass it to this function. So here we create a person, initialize it with 20. Again, we can use braces. Either works. Now we can call showPerson and pass this person object, right? But let me show you something. Here we can also pass an integer. The reason this works is because the compiler knows that in this class, we have a constructor that takes an integer. So when we pass an integer to this function, the compiler is going to do an implicit conversion. So it's going to implicitly convert this integer to a person object. So on the fly, it's going to create a person object, and then it will pass that person object to this function. But look at the syntax. In this case, it doesn't really make sense to pass an integer to this function. showPerson 20, right? It's kind of weird. This is where we can use the explicit keyword to prevent the compiler from doing an implicit conversion. So back to our class declaration. If we mark this with the explicit keyword, now we cannot pass an integer to this function. We get an error saying no matching function for call to showPerson. So the compiler is forcing us to pass a person object here. So this is how the explicit keyword works. Now in C++, we refer to a constructor with a single parameter that doesn't have the explicit keyword as a converting constructor. So this constructor can be used to convert an integer to a person. If we apply the explicit keyword, this is no longer a converting constructor, okay? Now here's your exercise. I want you to add two constructors to the textbox class, a default constructor and a constructor that takes a string object. Declare the second constructor using the explicit keyword. All right, this one is super easy. First, we're going to add a default constructor. So here we use the default keyword. Next, we add a constructor that takes a string object. Now, once again, we want to declare this as a constant reference parameter, okay? Now, if we try to generate the definition, again, CLion is suggesting to use the explicit keyword here. So let's do that, and then generate the definition for this constructor. Now here we can initialize the value attribute using a member initializer list. As simple as that.